Fractive is a hybrid granular effect and sampler. You can load samples in, or you can record samples directly into Fractive. It's a sampler that can actually sample, which is quite rare when it comes to VSTs. It's also an insane multi-effects processor. It's got so many options, and you can modulate it in some really interesting ways. You can also use it as an audio effect or an instrument, which is really cool, and there's different applications for each, which we'll go through. To me, it's like the Swiss Army knife of plugins. It's got so much in it, and you can really get so much of your track done just with Fractive. And because it can do so much, it's an automatic way of speeding up your workflow because everything is right there in one plugin. In this video in particular, we'll be looking at using Fractive for Studio One. So let's first look at how to install it. First, go to syncaudio.io to actually get the plugin. Click on this hamburger icon in the corner and then click on downloads and download the installer for your operating system. For me, it's Windows. I'm not going to download it because I already have. But then once you have downloaded it, just open up the installer and go through the installation wizard. It's pretty self-explanatory, but the thing you need to pay attention to is make sure that you have the VST3 plugin, because that's what Studio One needs for this to work. If you want to get the AAX plugin as well, that's up to you. This is just where the standalone application is installed, and then this is where the VST3 plugin will be installed. This is important because you want it to be in the same place as your other VST3 plugins so that Studio One can find it, so just make sure that's the correct path. And then continue through, it'll install the plugin. I'm not going to do it because I already have. And then when you open up Studio One, it's going to scan through your plugins and it'll add in Fractive. If it doesn't scan through your plugins, just go to the Studio One menu up here, click on Options, go to Locations, and then VST plugins. And you can check the scan at startup so that it will scan next time you start up Studio One. And below, it's worth mentioning the locations. This is just the paths where your VST plugins are located. You can also add paths in so that Studio One can use them to find other VST plugins that you've got on your computer in different locations. And then once you've done that, you're going to need to restart Studio One so that it scans for the plugins and we can get Fractive to appear. Now, once you've reopened Studio One, just go to either Effects or Instruments, because Fractive comes as an instrument and an audio effect. And then scroll down until you find Sync Audio and then load up Fractive. It's as simple as that. The same works for instruments. You just go to the Sync Audio folder and then drag in Fractive, and you've got a MIDI channel with Fractive now. So your MIDI controller can be used with Fractive in two different ways. You can use it to play notes into Fractive with the keyboard, and you can also use it to manipulate the parameters in Fractive with any knobs or faders your MIDI controller might have. So plug in the MIDI controller that you usually use with Studio One if you haven't already. If we look at the instrument version of Fractive first, so that's this track I've got here, we need to make sure that the track is armed. That means that this recording button is red. So if it's not, just click on that. And if I play notes on my MIDI keyboard, you can see at the bottom here on the keyboard in Fractive, if that's not showing up, just click on this button here. And if I play some MIDI notes on the keyboard, then it's already showing on here. So we've already got the capability to play Fractive as an instrument. If I just grab a quick sample to load in to show you, I'll just move the sample start and end so that it lines up with the sample. And if I press any of the MIDI notes now, it's going to play this sample. So it works. We can use the MIDI keyboard and treat this as an instrument. Now, to use your MIDI controller to control the parameters in the instrument instance of Fractive, we first need to open up the channel editor in Studio One, which you can find by going to the mix console. If that's not open, just click on mix down here and then go to the instrument track with Fractive on it and click on this little knob button here. If you hover over it, it says channel editor. So click on that and then this window will appear. It will look a bit different depending on what MIDI controller you're using. But for my MPK Mini, I have 8 different knobs that I can use to control the parameters in any plugin. So first you need to move the knob or fader on your MIDI controller that you want to use to adjust the parameter. And if I do that, you can see that the channel editor is following what I'm doing. Now, if I right click on this, you can choose assign knob 1 to K1 on MPK Mini. This will just be for whatever device you have. Mine's already ticked, so I don't need to click it, but if it's not ticked, then click on that. And next, click on this wrench in the top left corner. This is going to open up all of the parameters that you can use for your MIDI controller. So if I just choose the LFO depth 1, I just click on it twice and then it'll appear in the target. So now when I move this, it's going to adjust the LFO 1 depth. And if I move this out of the way a bit so you can actually see it, There we go. It's moving exactly what I want it to. So it's all set up. I can get out of this menu, but what I can't do is get out of the channel editor. If I close the channel editor now, you'll see that it's not doing anything. And if you look at the top up here, on the right, you have the value for your MIDI controller. So that's changing. And then the channel macro, which is what we've just set up, isn't moving. However, once I bring the channel editor back, have a look at the top here. When I move, it's also moving the channel macro, and now it's working again with Fractive. It's a weird thing with Studio One, and it's not exclusive to Fractive. It's with every VST that I've ever tried on here. So it's just something to remember, that keep your channel editor open when you're using your MIDI knobs or faders to control parameters within a plugin in general. Now, for the audio track with Fractive loaded up on it, we have it here. It's a little bit different. The process of assigning knobs and parameters is exactly the same as what we just did with the instrument. But the difference is, if you want to go to the channel editor, which is this button down here, the same as the instrument, but if you click on it, it makes the plugin window disappear. Now, we know that it's not going to work properly if we can't have both open. So what you need to do is click on this pin at the top here. This keeps this window open. So I can then open Fractive either by clicking it here or double clicking it in here, and we have both of them open. So now if I go to choose a parameter, it will work exactly the same as it did for the instrument. If I just move this, you can see I've assigned it to pitch, and it is moving the pitch. We're almost on to making music, I promise. But first, I just want to show you one more thing, and that is how to output audio from Fractive to another track in Studio One. So if I add another track, I'm going to choose a stereo track, and I want to send audio from this instance of Fractive, which is the instrument, to this track so that I can record whatever I've done in there. So it's pretty simple. You basically need the track with Fractive on it to send audio to another track, and we need to change the outputs. So if you go to options again, either by going to the Studio One menu, or you can press Control or Command and then comma, it loads up the options. And what you want to do is go to Song Setup, and that's this button down here, and then go to the Audio I/O setup. And we want to add another output. So if I just add stereo, and I can rename this to Fractive or whatever I want. If I click apply and OK, and then down in the mixer, you see that for each track, there is two different options in each box. First one is the input, and the second one is the output. So for the instrument of Fractive, we want to output it to the new stereo output that we just created. And then for the audio track, we want to take that output and use it as an input. So we just change the input to Fractive here, and that will be in your outputs. Now, it's important to also press record on this, otherwise nothing's going to come through. But if I now play some notes on the MIDI keyboard, you can see that it's all coming through. And if I just record something really quickly like this, pretty badly played, but you can see that it actually recorded the audio. So if I solo this, you can then hear. Not a masterpiece, but it's working. Like, everything's coming out, so that's great. And this works the same for the audio track. If you just have the output and take it to Fractive, I can press play on this and it'll be outputted to this track that I've created. So yeah, we've now got audio coming out of Fractive from the instrument and the effect, which is great. We can now start actually making something with this. So now that we have the basic setup, we can actually start to build a track. And I have a simple drum beat here that I've made. I'll just press play so you can hear what's going on. And I want to use Fractive to add some more interest to it. So I'm going to sample the entire drum beat into Fractive using the built-in sampler that Fractive already has. So if I just collapse this, and beneath I have an instance of Fractive with the audio effect. And I want to send all of these drums into here so that I can manipulate it, and then we can create some interesting sounds. So what you'll need for that is to use a bus, and it's pretty simple to set up a bus. Just highlight all of the tracks that you want to send to the same place, right click and add bus for selected channels. Then it will create this, and automatically all of the outputs will be for that bus. I want to send this bus into Fractive, so I need the output to go to a new stereo output. In this case, we're going to use the same one that we created earlier called Fractive, and I want Fractive to receive this audio. So I'm going to set the input to the same which is in outputs, and then Fractive. In order to hear anything, you have to press record on the Fractive track so that it's actually getting the audio properly. So now when I press play, it's going to start showing in Fractive. And once I've got a bit that I like, I'll press stop and I can press this freeze button so that it will keep the sample in there. You'll see what I mean in a second. And there we go. So I've got a little bit more than I wanted because I want to make sure that the loop is the same time. So I'm just going to set the start and end points here so that we can listen and make sure that the loop is actually repeating in the correct way. Okay, that's great. It's now fully in time and I can start messing around with it and getting some interesting sounds going on with this. What I've done here is use the high pass filter at 560-ish hertz just to cut out the low end because I want to create a layer which is sort of on top of everything and essentially like another percussion layer really. And then what I've done is I've got the pitch kind of going crazy, and with one of the samples it's really causing this nice wobble effect, which I quite enjoy. And that's linked to the host BPM. And then I've got the formants going absolutely mental. It's just giving this nice sort of scratchy sound on top of everything. So this is what we've got. Which I'm really happy with. So now I just need to output it to a new track and we'll use the same method that we've done before. And because Fractive was the input for this channel, I can't then put Fractive as the output, so I'm just going to remove the inputs so that I can add Fractive as an output and then put Fractive as an input on the new audio track. And if I arm the track and load up Fractive, it should be playing. Brilliant. So I'm just going to record and I'm going to press play and then I'll line it up afterwards. Cool, we've got our loop. So I've just lined it up and I can blend the affected track by just changing the volume of it. So this is what we have. So it's just adding this interesting percussion that's custom made specifically for this beat because it's using the beat as the sample, which is really cool. I love it. One of the great features of Fractive is to be able to manipulate sounds live, whether that's in a live setting at a performance or if it's using the MIDI controller to control parameters as you're recording it into the actual song. That way you can really get hands-on with how you're manipulating sounds, and I find it much more musical to do it that way. You're really in control and feeling it with the music. So I have a loop here that I want to manipulate with Fractive, so let's just have a little listen to see what we got. So I'm going to use the MIDI knobs that we've set up in Fractive to manipulate the sound of this as the song is going. So I've assigned one of my MIDI knobs to the filter. I've set it as a low pass filter and I've got the frequency under control of one of the MIDI knobs, and then the other one I have the formants. So I'm just going to press play and get some interesting sounds until I'm happy with what I've got, and then I can output Fractive to another audio track and record it. So I've just lined up the recording with the track and made sure that everything's in time and in sync. And this is what we ended up with. You can hear that I'm playing the effects with the samples. So I'm using it to create moments that the sample already has, but I'm emphasizing certain things. Cool, so that's the first way that I'm going to use this sample. The second way is a bit weirder, and it's using the XY pad. So I'm just going to load up the macro control again, and I'm going to change what I'm targeting with each knob. So if I go to Fractive, and for the first knob, I'm going to use pad X, and for the second knob, I'm going to use pad Y. X dictates where the start point of the sample is, and Y dictates the length of the sample. And with this, if we really make it small, we can get some really weird granular synth stuff going on. And that's what Fractive is really, really great at. So I'm just going to press play and mess around with this to get something cool going on. And what I'm also going to do is add a high pass filter on it, just because when you start getting into granular, that really small loop can start to build up quite a lot of low end. And I'm not looking for that in this. Obviously, it's a great tool and you can use that to create some really interesting bass sounds. Right now, I'm trying to create more of an effects layer on top of everything. So I'm going to adjust the filter to taste so that it's just cutting off some of the really low frequencies. And I'm going to press record and play some stuff over this and see what we can get. So I've recorded in something that I really like, and I've added Crystallizer by Soundtoys in there just to create some really weird extra delay sounds to go on with it. So this is what we ended up with it soloed. Kind of reminds me of how the internet used to sound, if you're old enough to remember that. And yeah, in context of the track, this is what it sounds like. Honestly, I love the way that adds so much character to the track, and it's just such a fun way to play with a sample. It's already in the same key because we're using the same sample. It's just creating some really weird noises, but they're still in context with the song. So you can push it a lot further than you normally would. And that's one of the things I just love to do with Fractive. So now we're going to look at using Fractive more like a traditional MIDI instrument. And that is by loading in a sample and playing it either with a MIDI controller or using the piano roll. You can do either and record it in. But for me, I'm using the piano roll. I've got some bass notes put in here. And if I just close that, and I can show you what we've got going on. So that's very basic. It's just a one-shot bass sample. I've pitched it to match the rest of the song. And I've also just increased the formants a bit to get a bit more attack coming through with the bass. So if I show you what that sounds like with the bass going as well, we've got this. So we now have a bass sound, and it's once again using Fractive. It's really a plugin for so many uses. And if you want to create your own style synthesizers or instruments, it's a great way to do it. And very rarely do these instruments come with such great effects to go with it. And you can create some really weird granular instruments with this as well. And the next thing I want to add is some chords. I've loaded in this one shot of a single note from a synthesizer. And I've once again drawn in some notes on the piano roll. I've adjusted the pitch, and I've also added a low pass filter on there. And I've also added a very small amount of modulation, literally 5% to the formants. And it just creates this nice wobbly effect, which isn't too much that it's losing the notes, but it adds some more dimension to the sound. And this is what we get with that. So as you can see, I dropped it down 1% as well, just because it was a little bit too much, but I wanted a subtle wobble effect going on, and that's achieved it. So with everything in it, this is what we've got. So a lot of interesting textures there and a lot of weird sounds that you can really only get this easily with Fractive, and it's just such a powerful tool to use.